Same old man. Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for November 6th, 2024. And I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. If you listen to our review of A Different Man, welcome, as both of these are landing on the same day, given the schedule this week. And as I noted at the top of that episode, I've been feeling a certain way today, feeling a little despondent.
Not quite the remarkable life you were hoping for.
Yeah, well, look, talking about A Different Man, getting back into the swing of things and talking about movies, that did bring me a lot of joy. I love A Different Man. Please go check out that episode if you haven't already. We had a really great time talking about that movie. It's fantastic. And I'm deeply excited to talk about this documentary as well. So I am at the very least ending the day on a high note. Perhaps some hashtag JD tears. We'll see.
Hey, but we often talk about how a movie can stick the landing and just makes you think you had a great time, right?
Exactly.
Not the case with this movie, but maybe the day that many people are having. If you can stick the landing, then maybe you can go to bed happy.
Yeah, maybe you can go to bed happy. But yeah, we're going to have a really great time, even though there is a pathos to this documentary. It is quite emotional, but we're going to have a great time talking about it nonetheless. And we're going to end the day on a high note. So I am very much looking forward to getting into this documentary. I don't know how many people have seen this. It lands on Netflix. This was just released on Netflix. I was fortunate enough to see this a few weeks ago when they sent me a screener for it. And it came at a time, I believe this was maybe at the end of September. Actually, it might have been like a month ago now that I think about it. At any rate, Netflix was kind enough to send a screener for this, and it came at a time where I couldn't get to the theater because of, my lovely children. So I was at home, my wife had gone to bed, and I wasn't exactly sure what to watch that night. And I didn't really know anything about The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. Did not know what it was about. I didn't even know who directed it. I just, I was like, I saw the screener. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this a go. And boy, oh boy, did I have a response to this movie. I had quite the response.
Yeah, you mentioned not even knowing who the director was, because I heard a lot of people talk about this, and I went and watched it on Netflix. I didn't have a screener to watch it earlier, but halfway through, I then realized, this is directed by Benjamin Ree, and I loved The Painter and the Thief. It's that Benjamin Ree. Holy cow, no wonder this movie's working for me.
Yeah, I had that realization after the film was already over.
It kind of
similar
clicked,
reaction. Very similar reaction, though.
When you think of The Painter and the Thief and this one, they do feel like they could have come from similar documentarian minds, right? We often talk about filmmakers and documentarians, how it really can be a form of creative filmmaking. You watch a movie like Camera Person, then you watch Dick Johnson Is Dead, clearly came from the same directorial mind, Kirsten Johnson. But I do feel the same way about Benjamin Ree with these two films. They both feel very artful in similar ways.
I completely agree. I don't know if this is the case, Brendan, because at this point, he's only done 3 feature-length films. And I have yet to see Mangus, his first, that premiered in 2016. Although I'm sure it's great. But I haven't seen
it is. I'm sure it is. I mean, his track record is 2 for 2 for us.
Yeah, it's very good.
I can only assume.
And look, between Ibelin and The Painter and the Thief, is Benjamin Ree one of my guys? He might be. He might
As
just be
far
one of my guys.
as far as documentarians are concerned, I think he's definitely one of our guys. I'm trying to think of other documentarians working today that are doing similar things creatively that are just working for us. I think of someone like Brett Morgan, who might be one of my guys as well. He might actually
Mhm.
be my guy as far as documentarian filmmakers are concerned. But Benjamin Ree, I want to see more of what he can do after this, because he could end up being even more of one of our guys as his career goes on. I think he's really starting off strong here.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he's quite young in his career,
Hmm.
so a long way to go. But as it
Yeah,
stands now, he's on his way to very much being one of those for me.
yeah, yeah.
Kirsten Johnson is probably my favorite documentarian working right now.
Yeah, I think she has
But
the best. Well, she at the very least has my favorite documentary of maybe the past probably 10 years, honestly, with Dick Johnson is Dead. So
Mhm.
she's got the edge in that regard. But man, such great films that we're talking about here, and such great filmmakers, and now we've got another one
Mhm.
here.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because in addition to that one, I would say like Camera Person is another big one for me.
Oh yeah, so
So
good.
I mean, but similarly, because I want to say Camera Person was the first of hers that I caught up with. And then you
Hmm.
got Dick Johnson is Dead. So it's like, man, live. She's just hitting all cylinders. And like Benjamin Ree just has that similar trajectory.
Benjamin Ree is our age. That's insane. I didn't realize
Crazy.
he was that young. He was born in '89.
Crazy. I know. Good on you,
Man,
man. Good on you. Younger than we are, doing fantastic work. What are
the
we doing
man
with
is, well, I
life?
mean, he's younger than you. He's older than me by only a few months. Yet here I am podcasting about his movie. He actually went out and made a
Just
movie.
went out and made some movies. Yeah. Good
Yeah.
stuff. All right, let's get into it. The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, as we've been talking about, directed by Benjamin Ree. If you're not familiar with it, this is about Matt Steen. Well, who is that? He was a Norwegian gamer who unfortunately died of a degenerative muscular disease at the age of 25. His parents mourned what they thought had been this lonely and isolated life when they
Mhm.
started receiving messages from online friends around the world. And we'll get further into what that is exactly. So, Brendan, what
Yeah.
did you think about? I guess you've already gave us
Oh,
the
yeah. Movie's
the
really good.
brief feeling of it, but what do you think about The Remarkable Life of Ibelin?
Well, I guess for the sake of getting the comparisons out of the way, we did just release a review of A Different Man, the
Yeah.
Aaron Schoenberg film with Sebastian Stan and Adam Pearson and Rana Reinsva. And we talked a lot about that film during that review having similarities to The Remarkable Life of Evelyn.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly talk about those same thematic ideas and how they may be similar to something like A Different Man in their own way. And I do think that's really fascinating here. I also want to maybe jokingly make another comparison to another movie, well, really another property that became a fairly popular movie in its year. Uh, about halfway through The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, I thought to myself, man, this is a much better adaptation of Ready Player One. It really is.
Sure.
And of
Okay.
course, I kind of enjoyed Ready Player One from Spielberg.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
Sure.
I don't know if it's going for the same. I mean, I think it might be going for the same level of complexity in its own way. I just don't think it gets there. This movie has a pathos to it. It really does. And we'll obviously talk a lot about its themes on self-image, self-hatred, self-respect, especially given Matt Steen and his disability. Like, as a movie about his disability, I think it's very fascinating. And the film is also very daring in capturing how at times Matt may have kind of used his handicap in the wrong ways. We'll get more into
Yeah.
specifics as this conversation goes, but that's very bold that this movie about this family, about this young man, was willing to go there. And I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very bold move in that way. And the movie is very moving. It really is, especially when it concludes in a very beautiful way. And I also appreciate for a film like this that is essentially about the online gaming world, it never becomes a commercial for that in any way. Like, it doesn't feel
Yes.
like it's trying to sell you on World of Warcraft or anything. And it could have easily fallen into that trap. It really is just about a family's ignorance to how an online community can actually form. It's something that we do all the
Mhm.
time. We're not gamers, but we do have an online community, and I do feel like we have
Yeah.
developed friendships with people that we may not have physically met in real life.
Yeah.
But it doesn't become like an advertisement for that lifestyle simultaneously. It doesn't
Yeah.
condemn it, but it doesn't necessarily say like we have to be. I
Mhm.
appreciate that it doesn't become that type of like preachy advertisement, and it
Mhm.
becomes a very moving portrait of how a family was able to learn that their son actually was popular in a very different way, and that was kind
Mhm.
of a beautiful thing to see. So yeah, I really like this movie.
Yeah, I was utterly blown away by this documentary, as I somewhat alluded to there a
Hmm.
moment ago. The way it examines grief and suffering and the deep desire to matter in some sort of
Hmm.
way absolutely slayed me,
Yeah.
absolutely destroyed me. There's already a sense of tragedy to Matt's story, given his condition and the challenges that brought to the
Hmm.
family, as we see
Hmm.
in the opening 15 minutes of the film. I
Yeah.
mean, the footage we see of Matt's and his deterioration is very heartbreaking.
Hmm.
So there's an inherent pathos here that is hard to ignore, but that is not at all what makes this film great. Where things become fascinating is that his parents discover, as we alluded to there in the synopsis, that there was
Hmm.
more to their son than they ever imagined. They knew he
Yeah.
was a gamer, but they had no idea that World of Warcraft had given him a tangible life of love and friendship and community that he did not have in the real world. They
Hmm.
simply wrote a goodbye blog post denoting that he had died, and they ended up receiving dozens and dozens of emails from those in the community that wanted to express their love for Matt. From a
Hmm.
parental perspective, that would be overwhelming, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it is immensely moving to see how his parents do respond to the profundity of getting to know and understand your child in a new way after death. But the emails are just the tip of the iceberg here, because
Yeah.
what this film does, the real gift that Matt's parents receive, is that they get to see him again. They
Yeah.
get to experience him again, as the film is able to recreate Matt's journey in World of Warcraft through art and animation, thanks to the
Hmm.
game logs that were recorded while he was alive and in the game. Could you imagine getting to see your loved ones resurrected through a digital archive come to life, getting to see
Hmm.
who they were in that world? Someone they could not be in the real world,
Yeah.
watching him fall in love, become a beacon for the community, even transform into the villain later on in his
Yeah.
journey. The
Yeah.
catharsis they illustrate is so goddamn remarkable in this film. It absolutely destroyed me. It ends in this remarkable way that is so moving to see everyone come together. His real world family, his online family, how they both simultaneously unite in their love for Matt, and what they rediscover about him along the way is truly breathtaking. I mean, I don't know
Hmm.
how else to say it. This is one of the most breathtaking films I've seen this year.
There is a transition point, maybe a third of the way through, maybe even halfway to be more exact, where the film completely shifts its narrative focus. Because for a good chunk of the opening, I don't want to call it standard, it's still very moving, but it utilizes a lot of archival footage and interviews with the family in a traditional documentarian
Yeah.
like way. But there is a moment when Ebelin's online life becomes more realized and recognized by his family, where the film almost becomes a straight up animated fantasy film.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
admittedly, if I wouldn't call this a criticism, I do wonder if the movie would have been more effective for me had it fully committed 110% to that, because we still sometimes get voiceover and interviews with people interjected throughout the fantasy film elements. And maybe I would have enjoyed the film more if it took a pause in that and just focused on the fantasy narrative as if it was like becoming a legit fantasy animated movie. I thought that would have been an even more bold touch, but that's more of a me thing than it is on the film. The fact is,
It's
it still
also a
does
money thing, Bren. You going to pay for that? You going to
Well,
pay for the animation?
well, here's what's interesting. First off, there's a lot of animation here. It's not like the quantity
There is
of
a lot.
animation.
There is a
It's
lot of
it's
animation.
yeah,
there,
it's less so the quantity of animation and more so the interjecting of interviews simultaneously during those animated sequences, that maybe having almost what felt like a narrative, like a fictional narrative, pulling the story together, I think could have been potentially interesting, but it doesn't necessarily hurt the film,
Yeah.
given the circumstances of how Benjamin Ree was able to get these World of Warcraft sequences generated for this movie. I don't know if you got a chance to read the IMDb trivia at all, JD, but apparently Benjamin Ree has stated in interviews that he included these sequences without the permission of Blizzard Entertainment, the company that owns World of Warcraft, and it was a big risk. He then, I guess they flew to California to show Blizzard what they had created, and apparently the bosses at Blizzard were crying so hard they granted the necessary rights for the film.
Yes, I love that story. I think
that's
that.
It just speaks to the
Good
power
on
of it.
you,
So,
Blizzard. Good on you.
So while I might, selfishly say, man, I wish it maybe would have committed a little bit more to those sequences, they still do enough that it works. It absolutely does work. And also knowing that these animated performances are being portrayed by actors with disabilities, I think is also a nice touch. That's actually another fact about the film that I think is really refreshing here. So, like just the circumstances of how this was made and how it transitions into a completely different type of film without it really feeling jarring, I think is really well done.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I think maybe where I'll slightly push back, I know you really like the film overall, but maybe where that doesn't bother me all that much is one, there already is a lot of animation here. Once the film shifts, and I don't mind the initial act of the film, if you will, where we are given context to who Mats is, who his family is, his condition, and ultimately what happened to him. I like how it's handled. It sets the foundation really well. It's less people in front of the camera. There's a little bit of that. It's mostly archival footage, though. So we get to see Mats and what his life really was like. From a little child, a baby even, into being a toddler and the struggles there. And honestly, I couldn't help myself. I couldn't help myself. This is where my bias is simply going to come through, because there's footage here of him that is the same age as my toddler right now. So you can't help but see your children in that. And watching him as a toddler even struggle to stand up was moving to me. And then getting into his young adolescence and how those challenges progressed even further, like actually seeing that, not just people telling us about it, but seeing what his life was like, the challenges he would have faced, I think sets the foundation really well for what the animation represents as it relates to those challenges. And there is a lot of it, and it's really great. It's fantastic in terms of the symbolism, and also just getting to experience Mats and his psyche and what he was experiencing and feeling inside the game. As it was something he couldn't experience in the real world. Now, where it intercuts and we come back to the real world, I do kind of love that here, because this whole film is about that, about that explicit duality of what gaming represents, why they love being in this community, why they love playing the game. It is an escape from the real world, but there is a real world that you do have to exist in still. And the emotions of what you experience into the game bleeds into that real world, and not just for Matt, but for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I love getting to see how that unfolds here. And forgive me, I don't have a list. I probably should have done more homework here, but as we noted, it's been quite the week.
It's been a week.
To forgive me.
I'll see if I can pull up some of these individuals that do get interviewed and speak to their, their relationship with Matt.
Yes. So perhaps Brendan can bring some clarity to the actual people that were involved here. But there is a girl character that Matt's is Ibelin. Ibelin is the name of his character in World of Warcraft. And there's a girl that he connects with, and it's really charming to see how they connect inside of the game. And we cut from the animation to that person in real life, that woman. And I don't even think she was Norwegian. Was she Swedish? I'm trying to remember.
I'm trying to remember that too. I think she may have been Swedish, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was Swedish. Either way, we cut to her in the real world where she talks about those emotions and what she was experiencing in the game, how that bleeds into her real life. Same thing. There was another woman that is not so much a love interest, but she is someone that connects with Ibelin, that connects with Matt's in the game, and she has a son, and she really struggles to connect with her son. Like, they don't really have any mutual interest. He's a little bit of like rebellious toward her, but because of their interactions with Matt as Ibelin in the game, they were able to connect in real life through World of Warcraft. Like, he was a foundational piece for that family coming together. So
kind of a therapist for them in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the blurring of the lines between fantasy and gaming and the real world. And there's a lot of this throughout the film. So the intercutting between the animation and the fantasy and coming back to the real world to remind us that there were real world consequences to this, I think was great. And not just from an emotional standpoint, but later on, even from a dramatic standpoint, as Ibelin became a little bit of a villain, and how that affected the community as well, which, as you noted, is a bold choice. So I think that's where I do find that actually quite effective here.
Well, yeah, and first off, as you're talking, I was trying to see if I can find out who were among the real people that Benjamin Ree chose to interview, and I'm still struggling to find it. So I guess we have to plead ignorance on that one. Maybe we can find it as we keep this conversation going. So yeah, we do apologize about that. I do want to make one thing clear when I say that I think I may have been more intrigued by the film had it committed more to the animation and what felt like a narrative feature as opposed to just a documentary. I don't mind the intercutting between the animation side and those interviews. I think if anything, there are moments where those interviews keep going and act as voiceover for the animation sequences. And sometimes their wording becomes almost like a literal embodiment of what we're seeing animated, right? And I think maybe that's where it kind of clouds it a little bit. I kind of like the feel of this slowly turning into a legit animated movie. And maybe that's really the only thing that may have made me feel like there could have been more of a commitment to that. But it's not the amount of animated sequences. It's not the intercutting between animation and talking heads, to put it as, bluntly as possible. I don't mind that. I think that is very much necessary. It might just be the merriment of the two that I don't want to say it didn't work for me. It's more just like, I think it would have been a really interesting and bold choice had this basically functioned like two separate movies in a way, because I think it was actually very much succeeding in that regard. But it does get into something really interesting, and something we talk about a lot with regard to documentaries is this idea of reenactments and recreation, because these animated sequences basically are that. And we often criticize documentaries for doing that, but this does it in a very different way. That's obviously
this is
very
about
thematic.
as great of a way to do a reenactment.
But I part of the reason why we often criticize documentaries that have too much reenactment happening, it's because they don't quite have enough archival footage to get away with it. And here, The Remarkable Life of Ibelin, Benjamin Ree was given access to a lot of great archival footage to open up this movie, which is a huge rarity for a lot of, and certainly a huge luxury for documentarians working with this kind of material. You're right. Like, even though there is maybe sort of a standard feel to the opening third of the film, the fact that we have so much real life footage of Matt's and his family is so crucial to this working. And I'm thankful that he had access to all of that, and the family was able to and willing to grant him that. Like, that really does help the film in a lot of ways. And the movie ends up becoming this kind of meta commentary on documentaries and how they can be successful or failures and how they choose to utilize reenactments. Like, it's a really interesting thing.
No, I completely agree. And before I respond to that, I did find at least some of the names here.
Oh, good.
Lysette is the friend, the girl that he meets when they are teenagers that they form a close relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive me, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but Zena Annie is the Danish mother who struggled to connect with her son until they met Mats in the game.
Okay.
And I didn't name him quite yet, although we briefly alluded to it. Kai Simon, I think is how you say that, is one of the leading members of Starlight, which is the name of their community in World of Warcraft, who becomes a big component, a big individual later on in the film as he's trying to help help kind of alleviate the tension among members in the group.
He's kind of their, he's their mediator of sorts.
Mediator. Yeah. So I did want to highlight those individuals. And then there's, of course, Robert and Trudy, Matt's parents, who are interviewed in the documentary as well as his sister, I think, is there briefly. So I wanted to highlight that as it relates to what you're saying there, Brendan. I do really love that. And you are right that it is a recreation of sorts, but this has got to be the best way to do it because one, it is
you have
unique.
to have a purpose for it.
You have a purpose for it. It's not there just to have some sort of visual element. There is a thematic and emotional purpose to it. And it, as I noted in my opening thoughts, it gives his parents an opportunity to see him again, to experience something they did not know that even existed. And to see your son who has already passed, to see him come alive through this character in World of Warcraft. And what was he doing? Who did he fall in love with? What drama did he create?
Yeah.
And I do love that the film is willing to go there. I don't know how Robert and Trudy responded to that necessarily, but if it was me, I would have loved seeing all of that. Oh, he became the villain.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But like when you couple
I would
that,
too,
and again, this is where I think the film actually does a really great job of tethering those antagonistic qualities, like those traits, the actions that he did in the game that rubbed people the wrong way. What was driving those actions? It just wasn't drama in the game because of how people reacted. All of that tethered to his deterioration in the real world, again, blurring those lines, right? Because as he began to deteriorate further and we saw him become angry at his condition, he became afraid. How those fears manifested existentialism, the self-hatred element of him that tethers to what we were saying in our conversation of A Different Man. He became indignant about the world and was deeply concerned about people finding out about his condition. Like he went way out of his way to make sure that people did not know that about him.
Right.
Including they had like this huge, they had this huge gathering, like real world event and Oslo, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And he was the only one of Starlight to not go to the event. And he
Yeah.
made up a bunch of excuses. He lied his way out of it. But really, it was he did not want people to find out about his condition, as he was afraid of what they would think of him. So yeah, that insecurity drove a lot of his decisions, to the point where he started to antagonize others in the community. And
Yeah.
as, like, again, like from a parental perspective, knowing that of course he struggled with his deterioration in the real world. Like as a parent, you would have had that context already, but then to be able to point as to like how that tethers to his game character, among, you know, how he initially presented himself, like just
Yeah.
to like experience that
Yeah.
and see your son in this new way. I can only imagine how profound that would be. And
Yeah.
for Benjamin
Well,
Ree, and also I
yeah.
want to call out Rasmus Tukia, who is the animator for this documentary as well.
Yeah.
He did a lot of the animation himself. And for them to gift that to his parents, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It's no different than, like you said, no different than watching one of your own kids act out because something in their home life is bleeding into their life in the real world. The only difference here with Matt's, his quote unquote real world was this digital realm. That's the only difference. But it doesn't make it any different at all. It's just his version of where he would lash things out like that. It's and what I think is, you know, profound and really moving about the film is not just its willingness to go there and showcase Matt's as someone that, you know, became kind of a victim of his own insecurities and his self-hatred, as you're talking about, and he lashed out on other people. But it was the way he chose to lash out on people. It was a simple act of flirting with another girl who simply because it made him feel better about himself in the moment. It's the same reason why many people in what feel like loving relationships might end up cheating on their spouses, you know, because maybe they feel like they're not good enough. So they feel the need to self-sabotage themselves. Like that's more or less what ends up happening here. So I think from a therapeutic angle, it's very insightful. Just looking at it through a very particular lens we don't often think about. And yeah, like the film's willingness to go there to turn Matt's / Ibelin into kind of the villain of his story when he was at one point perhaps the most popular among his community, is a very interesting arc that they give this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to give that a little bit of specificity, because I absolutely do agree, when Matt initially joins this World of Warcraft community, he does present himself as someone who deeply loves and empathizes with everyone that he comes across, which is why he is able to connect with Lisette, with Xena, Annie, and like he listens to them, he listens to how they're feeling and responds to them appropriately. He responds with love and genuine concern and sincerity, and he talks about how that helped him cope with his own condition. And I think what's so fascinating about that, so that's how he initially presents himself, where there's so much nuance to Matt's and how he kind of evolves over the course of the film. Obviously, he's not around as this film is being made, but he does have these blog posts that he wrote. That the community ended up finding and would read, and that became a part of his journey. They hired this actor, Thomas Steen Johansson, is my best guess at that name.
Good job.
And he reads these blog posts almost in their entirety, one of them almost in its entirety. He reads it as Matt's. He reads it as the voice of Matt's and gives a genuine, true performance that is incredible. So it's like we do get to hear Matt's talk about why he made the choices he did. And to your point, as far as, flirting with other girls, he references at one point, he did it just because he wanted to prove that he could, or, that he had the ability to do that. Something he couldn't do in the real world, obviously. But for him, just to be able to connect with all of these girls and fall in love or have these moments where they would hug and kiss and make out in the game, obviously. But to him, maybe more than anyone else, that was his entire world. That meant everything to him. So just to be able to do it despite the consequences, and there are obviously consequences to that with Lysette. And then of course that compounds itself later with other choices that he makes, and eventually he starts to antagonize a lot of the members in the community, and they have to kind of figure that out. But it all kind of stems from that same ethos, though, which then circles back to his deterioration in the real world. So it all kind of bleeds together, and just watching how the film navigates that here, it's heartbreaking but insightful, and I loved it.
That's what makes those blog posts perhaps the most surprising, I guess, blessing for a movie like this that really helps contextualize those things. It's hard. It's hard to comment on it in a way that doesn't sound like we're praising it for good writing, because he made those blog posts in real life. They did exist, but they do add the proper context there. There are even points where in those blog posts, apparently Matt's even writes things that actually that act as a recognition of his own antagonism, right? He even says a few times in those blog posts that he would use his handicap as an excuse. And if only I wasn't handicapped. Those are things he actually said. It actually provides.
He gets very existential about it.
Yeah. He reveals those things. He openly opens those wounds. So those blog posts are very revealing in that regard.
Very
without
revealing.
Without them, it would lack context for the film to really work, I think. And of course, kudos to the actor you called out there, Thomas Steen Johansson, for the reading of those posts. I think at one point it even says when he's introduced, text on screen tells us that they look for an actor that sounded a lot like Matt's in real life. They tried to be very authentic with that, because clearly it's not Matt's himself reading those posts. He's not around anymore, as you mentioned. He died at 25 years old, tragically. And casting someone to play a role like that could have easily been, dare I say, kind of an offensive thing to do. But the fact that they call attention to what they're trying to do clearly means they got the right blessing and the right artistic approach in handling that. So there is a lot of grace there.
And again, you think about Matt's parents here and the credence of this film in bringing their son to life. I presume that Benjamin Ree kept them in the loop as far as what his plans were here.
Oh, they were
absolutely
they were consultants on this thing through and through. They
absolutely they were. But I think about them experiencing this, seeing the animation again, as I said earlier, experiencing their son in this new way. He's able to come to life through the game, and there's a physical through animation, but a physical manifestation.
Yeah.
What if they were not aware of the voice though, and they hear the voice and it's so similar to their son, how that would take them to a new plane. They would transcend beyond this world.
I don't know if that would have been healthy. That would have probably scared the living crap out of them.
Just talking out loud.
It could have been one or two ways.
You are right though. There's no way they were not aware of that, but it just adds to that authenticity is ultimately what I'm trying to say there. And that's what I love about Benjamin Ree as a filmmaker here, because you are right. He, in a lot of ways, is fortunate to have not just the blog post, but the game logs. They can't make the animation without the game logs.
Right.
So they have that. They have the blog post.
They have a storyboard, essentially. They have
really a storyboard, but it takes a visionary to bring that to life. There's a version of this documentary where it's just Matt's family talking about his life, and maybe the community of World of Warcraft sitting in front of a camera talking about him, and that's all that it is.
Maybe
and
just
that
reading
could
the
still
game
be very
logs or
moving.
something like that.
Yeah, and that could be moving on its own, but to have the game logs, to have the blog post, and to be like, you know what, we're gonna actually animate this. We're going to and not just animate it. We are going to do our best to make it feel as authentic to the game as possible. Meaning that we're not going to enhance the lighting or the coloration of the animation. We want to avoid it looking like, a Pixar or Disney or DreamWorks. The animation doesn't look like that. It looks like the game. It looks like you're watching someone play the game.
Yeah.
And so that's how we're gonna bring Ibelin to life. And then we have these blog posts. Well, we could just, maybe put the text on the screen. We could have someone read it in very maybe somber but monotone way, and it comes off banal and tedious. But no, we're going to hire an actor that sounds a lot like him to dramatically and emotionally give the words weight.
Yeah.
And, that's what separates Benjamin Ree from a lot of documentaries we see each year, where it is very conventional and very trite, and there's nothing to the filmmaking, and it's just telling the story. But Benjamin Ree wants to do more than that. And my God, does he make that work here? It is phenomenal. Phenomenal stuff.
The animation here, I'm trying to say this carefully because I have a very particular reason as to why I'm saying it this way. It is not one of the best looking animated movies of the year, and that's what makes it one of the best animated looking movies of the year.
Exactly.
Well, because because it is trying to recapture something that did genuinely happen in real life. Like it's not just recreating what the game World of Warcraft looks like. It's recreating these particular moments just based on words on a page, those game logs.
Yeah.
So like I said, they had a storyboard to work with, but a complete storyboard also has rough sketches to work with those scene transitions. They didn't have that. Yeah. So they had half a storyboard. They had the words for the storyboard. That's all they had. Barely even a blueprint. So not only does it have to mirror the kind of herky-jerkiness of the game, but it has to also perhaps best mirror what could have actually happened in real life. So it has to go for that authenticity, which makes it a very bold and valiant effort. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite elements of the animation that tethers to certainly other members of the community, but gives us insight into Matt's and how he feels about himself. One of the more interesting elements of this story is that every single morning at the exact same time, as soon as he logged in, his character Ibelin would run in throughout the world, throughout their little community. I forget what the path looked like, but we see Ibelin constantly in this film just running that path every single morning. And I find that weirdly poignant. I find that
it's like
there's kind of an underlying sorrow there with him, and obviously wanting to tap into something that he could never do in the real world. As simple as that is, just having that as something to do every single day to kind of allow myself to fall into the game mechanics and how that helps me cope with my own circumstances. I don't know. There's something about the simplicity of that and the symbolism of it that I think illustrates a lot about the psyche of Matt.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like how many of us, when we wake up in the morning, I sometimes do this, and I've actually heard a lot of health experts out there say this is something we should do, is the first thing we do when we wake up, go outside. If you have a yard, go barefoot, become one with Mother Earth, kind of ground yourself to Mother Earth. This is kind of Matt's way of doing that, right? Like the way that he knows how, the way that he can ground himself to what is his version of reality that's able to be beneficial for him.
And to be able to move about, which is something he can't do. I think that's a really important aspect of it.
Yeah. So it's his way of, it's his way of reintroducing himself into the world that he feels like where he can actually, be, and I think it's very, very moving stuff.
Yeah, which is why it's kind of funny in a way, because a lot of the members of Starlight, they don't know the context. They don't, as we mentioned earlier, they have no idea about his condition because Matt did everything in his power to hide that from them. But they would see him run his little route every morning. They're like, I don't know why he does it, but we see him run every single morning. All the power to you. And so, like, there is something about that duality that I just find really fascinating here. The symbolism is obvious, of course, but on an emotional level, there is a complexity to it that I do really like, in addition to everything else we've been talking about. So
agreed.
So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. Yeah, I love this film. It's really great. It's really emotional. That ending sequence is. Yeah,
I got a little misty.
It's a gut punch
at that point. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
A little misty. I was undone. Uncontrollably.
I haven't found my inner JD tears just yet. I mean, there are some movies that make me cry hysterically each year. I still think nothing's going to beat Petite Maman. That's probably the movie that made me cry most hysterically so far this decade. But this one definitely did, it definitely did work on me.
Yeah, it's really great. It is available now on Netflix, so you can go and check that out. My last thought on this, and I have no idea how to say the name, so you're just going to have to forgive me here. Uno Helmerson. The score to this film is really good. I've listened to it.
That's true. That's a good point.
A few times outside of the film as well. It's great. It's one. It'll be one of the more underrated scores of the year. It's really fantastic. So wanted to highlight that as well. If you agree or disagree with us, of course, you can leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com as well. But go ahead and reach out to us. As we noted up at the top, we did a review of A Different Man that dropped earlier today as this episode is released as well. So you can go and check that out. Episode 609 is available. We talk about My Old Ass, Ghostlight, music by John Williams, a few others that we've recently caught up with. We talk about, some fun box office narratives. The fact that The Wild Robot last weekend rose by 10% on its seventh weekend still blows my mind. Pretty incredible. So we talk about that, all kinds of fun things. There's going to be a new Chasing the Goal, New Women in Session coming out very soon as well. A lot of reviews on the website this week.
Yeah.
So you can go to InSessionFilm.com. A lot of really great stuff there from our writers as well. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think you make a great point over at InSessionFilm.com. Let's highlight our writers because, they're doing some great work there. Dave Giannini really overseeing the entire pot there, doing a great job there, too. I think we need to highlight the great work coming out from the writing side of our staff. And things are getting busy. We're at the end of the year, so we're gonna see even more of that great content. So if you're a fan of what we do here, podcasting wise, whether it be what JD and I do or whatever we release on Chasing the Gold or Women in Session, also be sure to do some reading because we do offer a lot on the website as well that I think our writers are doing amazingly well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love our writers. I don't say enough, but they're fantastic. They work with Dave mostly on the website side of things, but I really do appreciate each and every one of them. They do fantastic work, so I am very, very grateful for them. So go and check all of that out. With that said, Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Go watch Ibelin. It's really great.
The better version of Ready Player One.